I'm Alison Sinclair and I'm Professor of Modern Spanish Literature and Culture and Intellectual History in the department here. So I work on Spanish literature, culture and thought, and it's in the modern period, 19th and 20th centuries. And over the last 10-15 years I've concentrated mainly not simply on literary texts but on context and how things moved around and what turned people on and how things were disseminated. So one of the things I've been concerned with perhaps all the way through, even when I was doing my PhD, was the idea of realities, often historical realities that weren't really recognised because they weren't properly recorded, or realities that some people had ended up having a wrong idea about. Now, one of these relates to the impact of the Franco years. So it became very worrying when we found increasingly we had undergraduates who had come along after Franco's death, that's to say after 1976, and so they witnessed a sort of great freeing up of publication and activity and cultural ways in Spain. And so they thought, oh, this is fantastic. And the Franco years were real shutdown. And quite wrongly, they thought that what went before somehow was similarly shut down and repressed and censored. And it's just not true. So in 2001, I started on a project which was to do a rereading of culture in Spain in the early 20th century, up to 1936, that's to say, up to the Civil War and Franco's intervention in Spain's history. And it was really to look into how far Spain was lively, Spain was open to Europe and Latin America. Spain had a life that was very much like the rest of Europe. And I wanted to know how this happened. And there were official stories and then there were unofficial stories. And some people began to emerge. Now, one of them was Trend, J.B. Trend, and he became first professor of Spanish in Cambridge in 1933. And so he's a key figure in all that, but he's also quite mysterious. Until now, there hasn't been a biography of him other than short obituaries, and nobody really knew much about him. We have a yearly event. We have a symposium, the centre of which is the Norman MacColl named lecturer. And so what we do is we invite a prominent lecturer and we build usually a day's worth of conference papers around it. And that makes a really interesting intellectual event, much better than a one-off lecture or a series of lectures by a single person, which is what we used to have before. And because over the last 5-10 years, more and more people have been taking interest in Trend, and because, slightly oddly, it was about to be the 80th anniversary of his appointment to the chair of Spanish, it seemed like a good moment to celebrate him. And to celebrate him in all his diversity and to try and make known to other people some of the things that weren't known about him before, that have come as surprises to a lot of us, and to share that with the university, with the Hispanic world in general, with anybody who wants to come to the papers. Thinking about Trend and what he means, and particularly thinking about him in the modern educational context, he sort of runs against the grain, and that's what's marvellous. What Trend was about was curiosity, passing on enthusiasm, following his own nose, and being very quiet about it, not being flashy. So it seems to me that he's a fantastic model for how we might consider education ought to be, particularly in higher education, but also further down the ladder. It's to do with getting people interested. It's to do with getting people wanting to know more about Spain, about other people, about what makes them tick, wanting to talk to them. And what's happened with Trend is that there's a whole genealogy of people who come from his tradition. Now, I wasn't taught by Trend, although our McColl lecturer was, and other people who are going to be at the symposium were also taught by him. But I was taught by somebody who worked alongside him, and I think had a lot of the same qualities. So I'm part of a tradition where what matters is people, what matters is what turns them on, what matters is are you enthusiastic about music or about cookery, or just in talking to other people on the bus in Spain, which is what Trend used to do, chattering, just having a free flow of information, and that's how culture expands. When he was a boy at school, what he was interested in was beetles. He wanted to study entomology, and quite misguidedly, I think, he applied to do natural sciences in Cambridge. Got here, and what did he get? He got a third. But from at least the second year, if not before, he was following his nose and becoming interested in music. And he formed a friendship with the musicologist at King's, Dent, who would become his lifelong friend, and a far greater influence on Trend, and person of significance for Trend, than has been known about before. And there's somebody who will be speaking who's been working on the correspondence between these two, and it really is eye-opening and amazing as a window onto a whole world, and not just a special friendship. So Trent started off as a failed natural scientist. He got into musicology. He went to the First World War from the trenches. You can read his rather bored letters about the First World War in the university library. And then at Dent's suggestion and with Dent's encouragement, he just went off to Spain. He was going to go to Italy, but Dent said, no, I'll go to Spain. And so he went and he picked up Spanish. How did he pick up Spanish? He talked to people. He got to know people. He got to know people who play music. And eventually he ended up in the Residencia de Estudiantes in Madrid, which was the focal point for everything that was avant-garde in Spanish culture at that period. And this is, for example, where he met the poet García Lorca. Nice tales about the two of them ambling rather drunkenly and not too steadily down dark streets after a night of drinking and reciting poetry. Trent never taught for the faculty before he became professor. It's absolutely riveting. If you spend a lot of time going through very dusty volumes of the Reporter, you can see all sorts of other people lectured on things Spanish, but not Trend. And then suddenly he becomes the professor in 1933 out of nowhere. And that in itself is an interesting little mystery. It's to commemorate Trend, to celebrate him, and to make him come alive again for those people who knew him, and for the first time to those who didn't know him. He's a man who is absolutely fundamental to Hispanic studies from the point of view of scholarship, but also eccentricity, waywardness, sheer enthusiasm, sheer wanting to know about the culture, the people, the subject. And that's what he communicated. So what we're going to do in this symposium is to have a variety of papers to open up various avenues into our knowledge of Trend. So, and the people who are speaking show you, in a way, just in themselves, the Trend factor. So that our McColl lecturer, Dame Margaret Anstey, is somebody who was taught by Trend, and she becomes a key figure in the UN. So what she does is go off into public service and diplomacy and politics. Now she's been writing the biography of Trend, and she'll give that lecture as the sort of setting stone to stabilise the historical context for what will follow in the papers the next day. And then we're going to look at trend in Cambridge, trend in Madrid, particularly with reference to the residencia in Madrid, trend and music, and trend as he inspired other people. And it's typical, perhaps, that one of our speakers on music is somebody who started modern languages here and switched to music and has become a prominent musicologist in Spain. And that's absolutely par for the course in trend studies. One of the things that we'll also do in the symposium to make trend come yet more alive and to celebrate both his scholarship and his very much living tradition is to have a performance of music that he was associated with, works that he edited, of which we have the manuscripts here in Cambridge, and also works by composers such as Gerard, we hope, whose presence in Cambridge was facilitated by trend, particularly at the time of the Spanish Civil War. Because the world that Trend lived in and the world that Trend found in the residencia was sort of crash, right? The world of colleges, the world of kings, the world of the residencia was where people mixed with people of other disciplines. It was second nature for them to be mingling as you do in colleges here. Trend used to talk about the residencia as Oxford and Cambridge in Madrid. So that the man, for example, who directed a lot of the music there was actually a scientist. And that again is par for the course. So I think he'd be really pleased that we're celebrating him with the support and the sponsorship of Crash, because it's just what he would have wanted. And we hope that this event will open up trend as a point of interest, not just to Hispanists, but to all sorts of people beyond.